When we look at key features of PBS, we're kind of considering individual family values. So what we presented were some of the polar ends, potentially, of how polar ends when we talk about family values. I don't want to say that one end is better than the other. And it's also, I want everybody to recognize this is a continuum. There might be families, their values may lie somewhere in between on that continuum as well. And not being, the middle isn't always right as well. These are just different perspectives from families. So when we're looking at view of disability and problem behavior, some families may take more of a non-scientific interpretation of their child's diagnosis and the cause of the problem behavior. On the other end of the spectrum, you might have a family that takes a very scientific approach. And I think this is really key because in the way we provide support might vary depending on the parents' belief system or how they perceive this. For example, when you're talking about functional assessments and doing parent training, when you're working with a family that has more of a scientific background, it might be a lot easier to just explain, this is a process, these are the principles of behavior, this is how you can manipulate reinforcement to change a child's behavior or decrease problem behavior, and this is how you can set up your environment. That family might accept that, and that might be very reasonable and easy for them to understand, versus if you have a family that has a different perception of what causes the child's disability and problem behavior. I have a personal experience that I wanted to share. It's a very close experience for me, a personal experience for me, but I worked with a specific family as a behavior consultant. For the service model in BC, we have a model, we're quite lucky, we're able to provide services during a long-term process, instead of just coming in to do a few months of PBS work. Often we work with families for a couple of years. So my job at the time was to set up an early intensive behavior intervention program for this child, develop a team, develop a program. So I had a first 3 to 4 months working closely with this family to develop this. And I was able to use that time to build rapport with the family, specifically with the mother. And during this process, I learned that this family had a very deep-rooted faith, and that was really important for the family, and that was that was one of the core values that they had as a family. Through various conversations, I knew that they went to prayer on the weekends. And on numerous occasions, Mom noted that she said, I pray for both of my daughters, especially the younger one. She needs more help. I pray that she's going to be able to overcome these challenges and that her problem behaviors will go away. And so this is what she had disclosed to me. In the 3rd or 4th months of working with the family, we decided to start implementing a PBS plan around a morning routine, especially transitions. Those were incredibly hard for this daughter. We went through the full process. We did the functional assessment. We did a lot of parent training. And immediately, still right before implementation started, that was after the weekend, and on that Friday, I was having a meeting with the family, going through the final stages, and I can still see in that mom's face, she was unsure. She wasn't sure if this was going to be working, if this would work, and if this will be effective, and I could see that nervousness in her face. And I had a pretty good rapport with her, so as I was leaving, I said to Mom, I would really appreciate it if you would keep us in your prayers and to pray that the PBS strategy will be really successful on Monday. And at that moment, her eyes lit up, her face lit up, and I knew I made a connection with her. And coming Monday, she did it. She did an awesome job. She was confident, and it was very successful. And that was a very important learning experience for me, especially around supporting with humility. As a professional, you hope when you walk into a situation that you have the tools and the knowledge to help a family. You have the good skills to be able to train well, to develop and put hard work into developing a good PBS plan. And you hope that that in itself would be enough to provide confidence for that family and for that family to feel, yes, this support plan is going to be effective. But in this case, I wasn't able to provide that, even though I tried very hard. And not to say that it's not important to do all of that process. Of course it is. It is. But I learned that in this case, her faith was what was going to give her that. And that was an experience that I had, and it was a very humbling experience, and that taught me a lot. And from that point too, another great part was that we had a pretty good working relationship prior to that, but with that simple conversation, that brief conversation, I feel like that interaction and the level of trust between Mom and I went to a very different level. And then she felt much more comfortable disclosing things that I wouldn't have known. So I went on a bit of a limb, and I had that conversation with her, and I learned a lot. I also want to put a disclaimer out there. When we talked about stereotypes and making assumptions, please don't go into a family's home and you see one religious-based painting on the wall and assume that this family has deep-rooted faith and values in religion. And you mentioned prayer. Please don't do that. You can damage a relationship very quickly if you do that. But for me, with that 3 to 4 months of building and establishing rapport with the mom and her letting me know that that was very important, I felt very safe and comfortable to say, can you keep us in your prayers? And it did wonders for us. So that was a personal experience that I had. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I was going to share an example as well. I was working with a family who had immigrated here from Vietnam not too long ago, and Dad was the main caregiver. And he understood a little bit of Cantonese, so we mostly communicated in broken Cantonese, broken English, and a lot of gestures. And so language barrier was huge, and it was difficult to get a lot of information from the family during the assessment process. So it wasn't until probably 4 or 5 months in that he had disclosed to me that he shared that he felt like he caused his son's autism. And that made a huge change in how we were providing services. We didn't know that he felt that way, and he carried a lot of guilt. He was sharing with me that, when they first moved to Canada and they had a hard time getting a job, getting childcare, his son was really young, and they found somebody to take care of him, and then later realized that this person didn't really talk a lot to his child. And so when he was sharing this information with me, he believed that that was the reason. He felt really guilty that he chose work over caring for his son and put his son in the care of this person, and now he has autism. So this was huge because it really affected how we could support the parent in implementation, helping them understand that this is not your fault, and that really impacted how well they could implement the strategies. So it's important to understand that people have different views of the cause of disability and how that might impact our services.
Okay, the next feature of PBS would be collaborative partnership. So some families may view the relationship between a professional and educator and themselves through a lens of filial piety. Filial piety is an idea where families embrace a hierarchy of people within a family or within a community. And often it's people that are older that are higher up on that hierarchy, so grandparents versus younger children will fall lower down on that hierarchy. And often professionals and educators are put on a higher on the higher tier of that hierarchy. And in Japanese, we are referred to as sensei, and sensei, that's a special title that they use, is a very, very respectful term that they use, right? So they view, if I walk into a Japanese family's home, they view my presence as a higher level. Versus a family that view collaborative partnership, everybody on that team member is an equal member, they have equal knowledge, they have equal contributions to make. And sometimes you have families that are view importance in maintaining harmony within that group. So they may not share ideas and thoughts that are actually contradicting the professionals. So and as Joe mentioned, Japanese families, there's something called honne and tatemae. So until you develop a rapport, they may not feel comfortable saying, actually, that's not what we're looking for. Actually, that strategy is not going to work with me because that doesn't fit within my routine. Versus a family that has and feel comfortable with a very assertive way of communication where they feel comfortable providing that information off the get-go. So Japanese families, for example, that I work with often, high sense of filial piety and high sense of maintaining harmony. Therefore, until you develop that rapport, you may not get all the meaningful information through a functional assessment process because they won't disclose that information to you. Versus Parbs mentioning a lot of the South Asian families that she has encountered and supported, they have a high sense of filial piety, but they actually have a very assertive kind of way of communicating. So they have high regards to professionals and educators, but they will feel comfortable saying, that's not going to work for me, that's not going to fly. So having that awareness, I think, walking into a different family's home will be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. It's really then up to us to read the situation, know that a parent might not speak up, and be able to ask the right questions and know if, not just assume that they're telling us what they really mean. I I'm working with a family who, I guess we're a month and a half into school year now, and the family is really unhappy with how things are going at school, to the point where the mom shared with me that she's thinking about pulling the child out of the school. But when I asked if she shared any of this information with the school, she said, no, they haven't asked me. They don't seem to want to hear what I want to say. And so she's waiting for the school to reach out. She sees them as the experts and they know best. But she's imagine feeling like you're so bad that you want to pull the child out of school, but you don't want to say anything because they want to maintain that harmony. And she's even worried that if she does pull her child out of school, what if then the two other siblings aren't going to be treated as well? And so all these thoughts are going on in her head, but she hasn't expressed any of that because no one's asked her that yet.